Good morning. Today's our new theme is ellipsis and substitution. At first, what is ellipsis? Ellipsis is leaving out subjects and auxiliaries. After and, but, and or, we often leave out a repeated subject or repeated subject and auxiliary verb, especially when the clauses are short. For example, he got up and had a bath. In the sentence, he is omitted. She came to the class but didn't say anything. So you can see in the second part of the sentence, she is omitted. We should phone we should send her an email, or we should phone her or send her an email. We usually have dinner at 7 and then watch TV. After then, we can also leave out a repeated subject pronoun. You cannot leave out the subject pronoun after, before, after, because, when, and while. They locked the door before they left. We will have a look at the photos after we finish lunch. She has stressed because she has too much work. He was horrified when he saw the mess they had left. I met Pete while I was working in France. Ellipsis. Leaving out verb phrases or adjectives. We often leave out the repeated verb phrases or adjective and just repeat the auxiliary or modal verb or the verb be. For example, Susan has never been to Ireland, but her sister has. Bob thinks he's right, but he isn't. Susan has never been to Ireland, but her sister has. Bob thinks he is right, but he isn't. I didn't like the film, but Charles did. They said I would love the play, but I don't think I would. If the verb we don't want to repeat is the present or past simple, we substitute do, does, did. We can use a different auxiliary or modal verb from that used in the first part of the sentence. I thought I would be able to come tomorrow, but in fact I can't. I know you have never learned to swim, but I really think you should have. A. You must read his latest book. I already have. We can also leave out a repeated verb phrase after infinitive with to. This is called a reduced infinitive. Example, I haven't been to Paris, but I would love to go. I haven't been to Paris, but I would love to. The students cheated in exam, even though the teacher told them not to. Substitution, so and not. We often use so instead of repeating a whole positive clause after verbs of thinking. For example, assume, believe, expect, guess, hope, imagine, presume, suppose, think, and also after be afraid, appear or seem, and say. I have finished the project by Friday or latest. I hope so. A. Will you be working on Sunday? B. I suppose so, unless we get everything done today. Gerald loves animals, and his sister even more so. With negative clauses, we use positive verb plus not. Example, I hope not. With be afraid, assume, guess, hope, presume, and suspect. Do you think it will snow tonight? I hope not. He's not very likely to pass, is he? I'm not afraid. The kids may be back, but I don't think so. I know she would like to gift even though she didn't say so. We normally use negative verb plus so, I don't think so, with believe, expect, imagine, and think. Now we will watch a video about ellipsis and substitution. Okay, let's start.
I'm Mrs. Mark. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. Italians are more cunning than I am. She didn't visit New York City during her last holiday to the USA, although she should have. Some people managed to vote, but most of them didn't. Teach English to adults exactly as you would to children. I'll be back with the explanation of ellipsis as soon as I can, so stay tuned. So by now you understand that in English we tend to leave out words rather than repeating them. This is what is called ellipsis. So ellipsis is to leave out words instead of repeating them. I will show you how. So the first example that we had was Italians are more cunning than I am. Okay. In this case, we have different subjects. As you can see, Italians, they, and I, first person. So these are different. But the auxiliary verb, or auxiliary verb and verb, in this case, because it's the verb to be, are the same. Okay? So, in a sentence where we describe a state or an action, you can have different subjects, but you have to follow the same auxiliary. Like in this case, Italians are more cunning than I am. Another example that I can give you is they can distinguish finer detail than we can. Okay, in this case, we have the subject, so they and we are different, and then obviously the auxiliary verb, in this case is a modal verb, can, is the same. Okay, so they can distinguish finer detail than we can without repeating the verb and the object of a sentence. Okay, you can just leave it like that, and we understand that the rest of the sentence, the previous phrase, is the same. Okay, so this is for the first rule that I'm going to teach you. Now, let's look at the second rule. She didn't visit New York City during her last holiday to the USA, although she should have. In this case, we have the same subject, she. You can see that. But we have different auxiliary verbs and verbs, obviously. In this case, auxiliary verbs, obviously. So, didn't and should have. Okay? So, in English, we can have different auxiliaries in a whole sentence, but the subject has to be the same. Let's look at another example. He would quit smoking if he could. Okay? So, would and could are different auxiliary verbs or modal verbs in this case, and he is the subject and obviously is the same in both parts of the sentence. Okay, and in this case we have a conditional, so this would be the second conditional. Okay, let's look at the other examples. Some people managed to vote, but most of them didn't. Yes, we can add not to the second group of verbs. Okay, in this case we have did, so as the auxiliary, so we added not. Okay, they didn't. Okay, so some people managed to vote, but most of them didn't, did not. Let's look at the other example. Widows receive state benefit. So in this case we have the auxiliary to do or does. Widowers do not. Okay, so we added not at the second group of a verb, in this case do. Let's look at the other example. Teach English to adults exactly as you would to children. In order to show contrast, you can use an auxiliary, a different auxiliary, or the verb to be, plus another object, just like in this case, to adults and to children. In this case, we have two different objects. Let's look at another example. People aren't so careful in Rome as they are in Toronto. Okay? So in this case, I used the verb to be. And we have the same subject and the verb to be. Okay? And I showed contrast with the negative. People aren't so careful in Rome as they are, okay, the same verb, but in positive, in Toronto. Okay, in Rome, it would be the contrast. In Toronto, it would be to show the contrast between the two cities. Okay, so let's look at the last example. I'll be back with the explanation of ellipses as soon as I can. This is an example of the first conditional, and just to show you that we use ellipses in conditional sentences. The first one is the first conditional, and I'll be back with the explanation of ellipses, is the will part, okay, and then the condition as soon as I can, okay, with the verb or the modal verb can on the second part, okay. Let's look at the second example. He would call me if he could. This is an example of a second conditional. So the first part, as you can see, the result, okay, this would be the result, is with would, and the condition is with could condition. So after if, we need the verb in the past simple. The past of can is could. So now, let's recap. As you know, in English, we can leave out words. This is called ellipsis. I've showed you 5 types of ellipsis. The ellipses that I show you are the ones that we use mostly for speaking. There are many others. In the first example, I told you that we can leave out the main verb and use a different subject if the first verb is describing an action or a state. In the second example, if you want to change the verb tense, you can use a new auxiliary, but using the same subject as in the first group, verb group, I mean. The third example, you can make the sentence into a negative one by adding not to the auxiliary of the second verb group. For the fourth one, to show contrast, you need to add a new object with an auxiliary or a form of the verb to be. The fifth one, I just told you that we use ellipses in conditional sentences. So we can use can or could in the second part of the sentence. Obviously, if we're talking about the first or the second conditional. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. If you have comments, requests, or if you want to post your own example, you may do.
So, it is the end of our video lesson. I think it will be very clear to this our video lesson. So, thank you for your attention. Our lesson is over. Goodbye.